Okay, it's officially 2 o'clock, so we will get started. Welcome to our webinar, Navigating Community Campus Research Partnerships, Introducing a Tool to Help the Process. For our presenters, if you could turn on your cameras so everybody can see you, and I'll give it to Adji to get us started.
Okay, well, welcome everybody. Thank you for participating in this webinar. My name is Adji van de Sand, and I'm an associate professor at the School of Social Work. I'm also the chair of the Center for Studies on Poverty and Social Citizenship. And the mission of our center is to generate critical and innovative knowledge that can help to inform social work practice as well as social policy, and focusing on poverty and social justice. So we engage in community-based research where we put the interests of the community and community-based organizations first. And it's for that reason that we agreed to participate in this CFICE project. CFICE, which stands for Communities First, Impact of Community Engagement, is a 7-year SSHRC-funded action research project. The goal of this project is to strengthen Canadian communities by answering the following question: how can community campus partnerships be designated and implemented to maximize the value created for nonprofit community-based organizations? And at this point, I'd like to introduce my two co-presenters. So to my left, we have Zoe Fetter. And Zoe is the administrative assistant of the research center. And Tara McWhinney, who you can also see, is a PhD student at the School of Social Work and the research assistant for the CFICE project. So I'll turn it over to Zoe right now, who will provide a bit of background to this project.
Hi, everyone. Today I'll be speaking a bit about the process of developing our toolkit that we'll be presenting to you today. So for those of you that are familiar with CFICE, Phase 1 looked at community campus engagement work through sector-specific areas, such as poverty reduction and food security. So common themes that emerged from the feedback and evaluation work from Phase 1 began to form the basis of the Tools Working Group. These themes on community needs included providing information on how to engage with universities, establishing common language for community-based and academic players, support for framing community-based research projects, and strengthening organizational focus. So this includes prioritizing needs, goals, and strategies for research. As one community stakeholder expressed, creating opportunity to get our thinking together. So starting in spring 2016, CFICE shifted towards cross-sectoral work, and this is when the Tools Working Group officially formed. First, we decided to build an advisory committee, inviting community stakeholders to represent the interests of the community and really prioritize which topics we are going to cover in our tool. So in organizing the advisory committee, we could see that community stakeholders were often limited in their capacity to participate and attend our regular meetings. It's important to note that these limitations for capacity in the community also affected our group leadership, as community co-leads for our project had to step down at various points in this work. And that's why the academic side of our working group is represented here today. Acknowledging that community resources were sparse, we started to go to community directly for feedback instead of organizing these regular advisory committee meetings. So our co-leads attended several community forums and got really great positive feedback from community members. And an important theme that emerged was that organizations don't always have the resources or knowledge to specify exactly what they want from a research partnership. So the working group continued to narrow its concept for a real user-friendly resource that could help determine whether a community campus partnership would really be beneficial for a community organization. As the group continued to collect feedback from the community, the idea of a research roadmap emerged. Community players continue to emphasize the need for this resource to be concise, for its scope to be manageable, while still having the breadth, to address real research partnership challenges. So we hired on Erin Kozak, an MSW student here at Carleton, to start forming this research roadmap for us, which leads us to today. So Tara McWhinney has taken over the ropes from Erin and has continued to integrate community feedback into our toolkit. So I will hand things over to Tara, who will explain more about our tool.
Thank you, Zoe. Hi, everyone. So that was a wonderful introduction for me and for the reasons why the work that I took on as a research assistant here for the project. So I guess what I'll do is to start with a brief overview of the consultation process that I started. I did do one-on-one interviews with community organizations, workers in community organizations who were interested in meeting, and they would review the tool. At that point, it was several pages of information and links to resources. And I got lots of really positive, good feedback about the tool and some good suggestions as to content and a lot of suggestions as to language. So that was understandable. And I also did a lot of connections with different CFICE project members as well. Some of these were community organizations who had been involved in the project, and others were academics. And I attended through CFICE a community-based research roundtable in Toronto, where I spent an afternoon discussing community-based research with academics and with organizations as well, community organizations. And I also did a poster presentation at Congress for the Conference of Social Work Educators. And there I was able to connect with different social work practitioners who are academics and practitioners, and to review the tool as well. So I got some contacts and I sent it out to a few people. So there was lots of good feedback that happened, and we definitely did lots of modifications. And then the next step was to figure out how to make the tool available to the community. So I'm just going to share my screen now. All right, that might take just a second to come up, but the tool has now been put up as several different web pages as a toolkit online, and it's being housed with the Center for Studies on Poverty and Social Citizenship at the School of Social Work at Carleton, sorry. So here we have, there's a link on the side for the toolkit, and there's an introductory page here. Now we will be having the toolkit made available in French. It has been translated. We're just in the process of getting it ready to put it up online. We definitely, like Adji had explained, we take a community-first approach with the information that we provide and the resources as well. We also take a very participatory approach to research, and I'll go over some of that as I go through. I'm going to go through first just the basic navigation of the tool. And then I was going to just give you a little, so if I was to do a research project and say I was with a local shelter and we wanted to review one of our programs, we'll go through the tool and see maybe some of the things that I might be interested in coming from a community organization, and how this tool can answer some of the questions that I might have. So just to begin with, there's a bit of introductory information. We will send out a link to the website as well, so you can go on and have a look at the tool afterwards. But we've broken it down into 5 main areas. Just also, we decided, and this was through feedback that was gathered from community organizations, was that we should have a section on research with Indigenous communities. And I'm just going to bring this one up. And so because research with Indigenous communities and Indigenous organizations can look very different than traditional research methods, there's a real need to protect traditional Indigenous knowledge, traditional knowledge, and also that the research will be very much in the hands of the community. So we decided that it would be best to provide some resources about this, and that the rest of, and just to let you know that the rest of the toolkit, it might look, research with Indigenous communities might look very different than what we've outlined in our toolkit. So I just wanted to highlight that. And also, we've also have the entire toolkit, the information with including the links to the resources is also available in a downloadable form. So if you wanted to have it on your desktop and to be able to go through it. And then this includes the entire checklist. So we've designed the tools like a project development checklist. And so all these different parts, sections, are online in the different web pages, but they're available here if you want to have sort of a checklist and then you want to have all the information follows below. There's many pages here. So I just wanted to point that out, that that's available. All right. So there's different ways to navigate through. So we have the main sections, which can be found here and also along the side. Within each section as well, I've broken them down into subsections. So you can see all of the project development questions for each one in the list. And then if I wanted to go just to the first view in this one section, I can click here and that will bring me to these ones: establishing partnership goals, engaging partners through a broker, and identifying partnerships, and approaching partnerships. But I can also, and you can always scroll back with the back buttons, I can also click on any one of the specific questions here or topics. So let's say if I was looking to evaluate a new program that I had, and so I work at a local shelter, and we've started a more intensive case management program to help clients coming in to transition to housing. Now we want to evaluate this program, perhaps because we want to get continued funding for the program. So if it's a very intensive program and we only had so much money to start it up, how do we demonstrate that this program is working, and how do we advocate perhaps with the provincial government to get more money to keep the program going? So as someone coming from the community, and perhaps I don't know anyone in universities, and I want to say, well, how do I find an academic partner to help with the research side of this project? And so I could come in here and go, well, identifying partnerships. Well, let's start there. So the question here is, who would be a good fit with our needs and interests? How will we work with them? And how will we know that an academic partner is truly community first? So in this section, I see that they're talking about, looking to my networks or a broker or doing internet searches to try to find community first academic partner. And there's some good tips in here too, talking about looking for academics who have connections to community organizations, who have done research that's community first based, or perhaps, looking for a university research office that has a community arm or a community focus. So these are really good tips for me. And then I look and I see that there's a section on ensuring that the community comes first. So this was done, this is a web resource that CFICE has put together through work that they've done. And it's talking about, what have we learned about community first approaches? And then how do we ensure that research is community first? And I see that there's recommendations for community-based organizations. So, and within here, I read up about how it's important to clearly communicate, my organizational priorities right from the beginning, and to only join a research team that adds value to my organization. And there's other tips in here too if I wanted to look at, what sorts of if someone was an academic taking a community first approach, then what would be their priorities? What would they be looking at? And I can read up about that as well. So I'm just going to go back. So that's some good information, but maybe I'm sitting here and I'm still a little unsure. I don't have my own networks. I'm not too sure where to go, but it mentions something about a broker. And so we have a section here on what is a research broker. So research brokers are those who can not only help us to engage with an academic partner for research, but also can help you identify different research partners. So this may be something that I want to look more into. And I see that we have a report here that says there's contact information about different brokering agencies. And there's also a plain language podcast about the report. Because the report itself is a little long, but I can come in here and listen to the web podcast about brokering, and learn that that brokers are there to help me to help us to share our resources between the academics and the community organizations, but also to mediate any type of conflicts that might arise. And also we'll find out that brokers can be agencies, they can be individuals. There are also brokering tools online. So there are different ways that this can be done. And if I wanted to look at some of this says that this includes some contact information. Well, maybe there's a brokering agency in here. And I'm just going to scroll through this one. There are actually a few, yeah. We have some information here on some different centers for community-based research. There's one here at Waterloo College. And it gives information about them and contact information. So you could begin to look through this and to see what's in here. And perhaps here's one in Peterborough at Trent Community Research Center. So this was a really good overview of brokering that was done. So I can look at some of these sources and see if there's ones that will help us out, that we can work with. All right, so I'm just doing a highlight of sections. I'm not going to do all of them because it's quite long. But let's skip over to a bit of project planning. Now, in the beginning, we had talked about a participatory approach. So with my shelter, perhaps I have peer support workers who I think it might be wise to have them involved in the research. Or perhaps there are other community organizations who I think that we should be including in this research project. So I want to find out more about a participatory approach. So how will we involve those affected by the situation in project planning and research process? So, and here we read up about how community members can bring in, diverse viewpoints. They can bring in knowledge that can help guide the research process and perhaps the design. And then there's we have several resources. One which I like because it's very visual. It's a guide for communities working with academics on participatory research projects. And it discusses the different reasons why we would want to do participatory research. And that it's functional, it makes the resource more useful for the community when we include those that are affected, and also that it can be empowering through increasing decision-making capacities of communities and community members. And you could go on, there's more about things that we should consider when taking participatory approach. So this might be something I want to go through some of the resources and see, if this is something that we can add into our research process and why we would want to and how we would do that. So if we're taking a participatory approach or in any research as well with partners, communication is definitely up there on something that's important to think about. So the question we have in this section is, how will we communicate our motivations, vision, capacity, timeline, etc., other things, and still work towards establishing a shared goal with common indicators. So here I can read about some of the things that came out of this CFICE project was a lot about agreeing on key definitions and terms. So coming to a common language between those who are, in an academic field and those in working in the community. So there's communication. The first thing to start is to defining terms and language that we may not use in common. And then, then there's the organization of the communication. How does that happen? If we have emails going back and forth, if we have meetings and we need to check in. So we have a resource here, which is a webinar that's been put up here by TAMRAC. It's Ontario Trillium Foundation. And this, I'm not going to play all of it, but this webinar goes over different resources and how to get information, how to get that information with using different applications online. So there's some interesting stuff in there, and I could read up about that and figure out different ways to bring all these people together and find ways to communicate effectively. All right, and then I just want to highlight one more part of the project planning. You can see there's other things in here too that you can go over. One very practical one would be timelines. So how do we ensure the project is well organized? Do we know how we will match community organizations and academic timelines? So that is one thing that came up when I was meeting with the community organizations, was that there's different timings. So if you have students working on projects as research assistants, we do have to keep in mind the school year and when they may be finishing their classes, or perhaps not in town anymore, or need to wrap up the project. So these are different things that we'd have to look that you read up and you learn that, and also too, if you're looking at advocating for resources. So if the shelter was looking to have the provincial government, fund this project, then we would all look at, well, if there was an election coming up, would it be important to get this research project done before then? So what are the different, timelines that we need to look at? And so we'd be looking at the timelines for the planning of the research, the implementing of the research, and the evaluating of the research. And there's a very practical project timeline template here, which you can download and use in Excel, and they have one for PowerPoint as well. The different ways to keep organized. All right, so I'm now just going to go over to the research design section. So this may be, I know when I met with community organizations, some of them say, well, we rely more on the academics for the research design, but coming from a community first approach, it is very important that this research is designed together with the community organization and the academic partners. So there's lots of different topics within here and information on things that coming from the community, you may not have the experience with the research. So one thing, we'll look at a few of them, but I may say, okay, well, does this research project fill a gap, and how will we identify the gap that this research fills? And so in looking at needs assessments, now what I could do for my research is I could say, well, if we're trying to get funding for this research project, perhaps we need to do a needs assessment to demonstrate that this new program that we have, that there's a need to review it. So there are different ways to carry out a needs assessment. When I look at this resource, it gives me different templates on the different types of needs assessment. Now, the one that I was looking at for my community would be a community needs assessment. So looking at a survey, and you can download and alter the survey to what your needs assessment. But if we wanted to to review those who were involved in the program and to demonstrate that, you know, this program does seem to be working. Now we need to do further research to get more into why is it working and how is it working. So that could be one way to help get funding for this research project. And also, we have a few other things in here, but one that, that you might want to think about as well is the research question. So how will we get focused and who will we consult? So when here it tells me that, you know, a research question should be specific and meaningful, and that it should be measurable. So how would I do that? And we have some resources here to get thinking about, you know, how to develop a good research question. And here it guides us through a process of starting with, you know, a broader subject. I mean, we're looking at homelessness, transitions to housing. And then we start to get into looking at some of the literature, you know, on these topics. But then we start narrowing our topic and asking how and why questions. So we want to look at, if we're looking at our program, you know, and we want to see, well, what are the factors that are contributing to successful transitioning to housing, and also maintaining housing, and what does it mean to have a successful transition to housing? So how do we measure that? Are we going to look at individuals like self-esteem, or perhaps their goals or their satisfaction? So how do we measure that? And those are the questions that we start asking when we're looking at our research question and refining it down. So that might be something that you want, that as a community organization, want to start thinking about those things. So when you meet with an academic partner, you can really talk about that, and then refine the question down. And also coming from the community and working with an academic partner, another area that I may need more knowledge would be ethics approval. So I would know from working with my academic partner that each university has their own ethics review board, and that we would need to go through that process for the research. So this section here talks to me about that process, and also provides more resources. So I'll bring one up here. And this one's for the University of Waterloo, but this gives a really good breakdown of what are the different information that is asked for when you're applying for research ethics. And it goes over many different aspects. So this would be something that would be good, that we would go through with the academic partner and fill out. But it's something that's good to know, to look at all the different aspects of that. All right, and lastly, in our last section on post-research. So here we're looking at, once the research is completed, how are we packaging these findings, disseminating, and then taking action and impact. So if our, if we're looking, let's look at the taking action section. So how will we act on our findings? Who will we approach and how? So if I was doing research and I wanted to advocate to get more funding from the provincial government, then we would definitely be looking at packaging our findings for them, but perhaps also other community organizations who can help us advocate for change, those who would be would be stakeholders in this area as well. And so we have different resources here. So tips for advocacy. And you can, I would go through here and look at each one of these sections. Yeah. So, and also under the dissemination section, we also have some different advocacy strategy resources as well. And in this one, it talks about using a logic model or a logic model to map out your plan for advocacy. So really thinking about that end result as well in the beginning of the research process and throughout, so that when it comes to the end, we have an idea of what we're going to do with the research results. All right, well, I hope that was a good review of the tool. And I will just stop sharing this. Sorry, technical difficulty. Oh, here we go. All right. And I guess what we'll do now is, I noticed there's a lot of stuff coming in, so we'll just open up the discussion. Zoe, do you want to, Adji?
Sure.
And then come back.
Thank you, Tara.
Hi.
So we have quite a few comments in the group chat. More recently, Dalise wrote, could we please have a link to that visual guide for participatory research? They say there's a brightly colored guide that was highlighted a little bit later in the webinar. So I'm not sure which link Dalise is referring to. I'm wondering, Tara.
Here, I'll just go over it again. That one was the participatory approach. So that was under project planning. And it's the first section that comes up in project planning, participatory approach. And it was the guide for community organizations engaged in participatory research with academic partners. So the link is here under the participatory approach section.
Great.
All right.
Now we had a few comments from Maeve. So Maeve says, hi, some colleges are also doing research, and even some community-based organizations such as the Center for Community-Based Research. It's good to focus on universities, but having colleges or research bodies mentioned alongside would be good. Mm-hmm. Or put post-secondary to represent both colleges and universities.
Yeah,
this is a great point. Yeah. There's some great researchers working at the college level. I think a lot of college faculty are often closer to the front line, and often college instructors are working part-time and also still very involved in the community. So that's a good point. Yeah. I think a lot of the resources we found were from universities, so I think that in the end informed a lot of our language, but that's a very good point. And also it should be said that this toolkit is supposed to be kind of a living document. So if anyone has feedback that they feel we should integrate into the tool, we are very open to that. And we're also hoping to have a feedback form on our website where people can directly comment on their use of the tool.
I know that one of the questions that a lot of community-based organizations have asked is just where can they get some help in securing funding for their project. And you know, some of these funding applications can be quite complicated and require a certain level of skill about research. And I think a lot of the community-based or post-secondary institutions that are committed to community-based research, you know, would be able to help with helping these community-based organizations apply and secure funding. I know that this is something that our research center has done, you know, with a fair bit of success. So I think it's, you know, helpful to let community-based organizations know that they can get some help with funding applications.
Mm-hmm. And we also have a section in the tool, I'll just bring it up again, on funding as well. It's under project planning, which so under project planning, we scroll down and there's a section on funding. And we have a few resources in here. So there's a list of different foundations that provide funding. And also we talk about SSHRC and CIHR funding, which are more, I guess, I don't know if they're just universities, but I know they're connected to the academic funding, but also just a list of foundations as well. So something to go in and look at as well.
So we got a few more comments from Maeve. So Maeve says, I've done many community-based research projects, even from a university community-based research office with communities without ethics. If the data collected is clearly not going to be used by researchers or academia, we have not needed an ethics process. But like you say, it can protect the community, it can be cumbersome, of course.
Yeah.
Very interesting, yeah.
It's something to keep in mind, yeah.
Maeve also asks, who are the groups and networks like CFICE that you found most helpful? For instance, redressing colleges, SSHRC and NSERC, now funding college-university partnerships with communities. Okay, some great comments, Maeve. So Terry might be able to answer that. What were some of the groups or networks that you found most useful?
That I found most useful? I mean, most of my contacts were through CFICE, and then I went to the social work educator conference. So I'm not sure how to answer that question. But
yeah,
because I don't think I really connected with networks per se or groups. I connected with individual community organizations through different networks that I had as a social worker, and through the CFICE project members as well. We sort of tried to branch out. So yeah, I don't know.
And we attended a lot of...
Oh wait, there's a clarification. I meant who else has these tool guides so we can market it and find the niche. There is actually a section in the tool, I'll bring it up, where there's some other, we do mention in the introduction section some other tools that can be, so maybe this. So there's an Access Alliance community-based research toolkit. So these are more generic tools on community-based research, community toolbox from the University of Kansas. And list and then we have another list here as well. But I do remember, like, Tamarack had a lot of information that was connected to the different resources in here. So that might be one group, and then these might be other groups or networks to look into.
So Nicole asks, how do you plan to update the tool on an ongoing basis in the future? Well, as I mentioned earlier, we are hoping to put up a feedback form so that people that do use the tool can comment, and we can integrate that feedback on an ongoing basis. At the Center for Studies on Poverty, where it's currently housed, we're also hoping to hire some research or a research assistant on a yearly basis who can really fully integrate that feedback and also look into maybe new resources that are available.
Yeah, to check for any broken links.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe eliminating any links that aren't working and replacing them with up-to-date ones.
So if anyone does have feedback, some initial feedback from looking at the tool today, feel free to write your comments in the chat. Let's see, we have a new comment from Nicole. Awesome. The tool is so great. It's nice to have something that has curated a bunch of useful resources and will be resourced in the future. Thank you, Nicole. Yes, thank you. Very helpful. I'm just at the place where I need this knowledge. That's great to hear, Delise.
Nice. Yeah.
So, yeah, again, I'd encourage you to write something if you have any last questions. Otherwise, I think we'll wrap things up. Know that the webinar today has been recorded, and we will be posting that to both the CFICE and the Center for Studies on Poverty website. So you can always refer back to that if you have any issues navigating the tool. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Tara. Thank you, Adji.
Yeah, thanks, Tara.
And thank you, Nicole, as well, for putting this all together. All right, thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.